Welcome back, Life Sciences. From that quick little break, as I say, get the oxygen going, get the blood flowing, makes for far more productivity. We're recapping on the whole gaseous exchange system. We're looking at the structures, we're looking at the requirements, how do we breathe, how are gases exchanged, and we're now going to look at, just recap quickly, this concept of homeostasis. How do we keep things equal? And then on the other scale, what happens when our lungs don't work properly and we have things going wrong? All right, so the first important concept when we looked at, and you've seen this whole homeostasis, right, throughout the work that you have done, and this is all about the balance. And right, when we looked at the kidneys, water and salts was important. When we looked at the digestive system, you looked at glucose is important. Now we're going to look how important oxygen and carbon dioxide is. Now, the very important that you understand here, when we look at homeostasis, it's not about the concentration of the oxygen, it was all about the concentration of the carbon dioxide. Right, I've put in a simple diagram. I drew it on the board last time, but very simply what we need to look at is that what we have here is that the carbon dioxide levels are going to drop. All right, so that's the one we're looking at then. But when we start to exercise, or when we start to do anything quite strenuous, cellular respiration goes into overdrive and a lot of carbon dioxide is produced. And as we said, it interferes with the pH. So we need to make a plan. And very often homeostasis is initiated by parts of the brain. And the brain that's going to come into action here is our medulla oblongata, our brain stem. And what the medulla oblongata is going to do is it's going to trigger two sets of organs. Number one, the heart, and it's going to say, hey heart, increase your heart rate. And the reason being, we want to get the carbon dioxide to the lungs much quicker. Then we also say to the lungs, all right, we go straight to the lungs. We must say to the lungs, guys, you've got to breathe in deeper and you've got to breathe in heavier. And yes, I know that oxygen is going to go with it, but remember, oxygen and carbon dioxide go hand in hand. So what happens here? Carbon dioxide is going to go out more rapidly. So if we're getting the carbon dioxide to the lungs more quickly, and the lungs are able to breathe it out more quickly, we're going to see our carbon dioxide levels are going to drop, and that is going to bring about normality again. We also looked at different diseases that affect, all right, the gaseous exchange system. We looked at some serious ones where we looked at emphysema, we looked at lung cancer, and we looked at asthma, and we looked at tuberculosis, TB. We linked again to the microorganisms, and then we have some minor, all right, like hay fever that might not be as bad. So remember, when it comes to the diseases, right, you don't have to look at exactly what the disease is. You're looking at how is it going to affect the breathing, how is it going to affect gaseous exchange, because it's all about getting oxygen in and carbon dioxide out, and what happens when we aren't able to do those things. All right, I'm going to go through a few questions with you. Now, the first question that I've put on the board is an essay type question. I am totally aware, all right, that you guys no longer need to do essays. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the question and I'm going to break it down into parts, which instead of becoming an essay, each part could become a long question that we could use in the new format of the paper. All right, so when you do past papers and that, you're going to come across a lot of essays, as I have also done, but you're going to see now that instead of the essay, and I think a lot of you are breathing a sigh of relief, right, there are going to be longer questions. So I think you're all very glad that there's no essay question. But let's break down the question and put it into, instead of one essay, a few long questions. Right, so James is training for a race by running 20 kilometers. I don't know why anybody would want to do that, all right, every day. Describe how oxygen is taken into his body, all right, and how it moves into his bloodstream. Now, what I would do here, describe how oxygen is taken into his body. I'm going to make that question number 1, and I'm going to stop over there. So what are they actually asking? Right, so number 1 is a long question on inhalation. So as I said, instead of it becoming an essay question, let's break it down. Okay, then it says how it moves into his bloodstream. There would be a question number 2, right? And that would be gaseous exchange. That would be the second part of the question. Then the third question, also describe how the carbon dioxide produced in his body is controlled to maintain normal levels. That third question, right, the long question, would then be homeostasis. So guys, if you do practice homeostasis, there we go. If you are practicing past papers and you do come across these essay type questions, you can just break it down into long questions. All right guys, so let's take the first long question, number 1. It's inhalation. What am I looking for? I don't know how to spell diaphragm always, so I'm just going to put D. What does the diaphragm do? It contracts. And when it contracts, right, it moves down. But that, I don't need to know all the details. The second thing that happens is my intercostal muscles also contract. So what does this cause? It causes, all right, the air pressure in my thoracic cavity, right, to decrease. It causes the space in my thoracic cavity to increase. So what I have now is, I have the space, I have this pressure, and what is the last point? Air will move into my lungs. So guys, there we go. Question number 1. It's a long question. Very often they can ask you how, explain inhalation. So there we've got the inhalation. We take it out of the essay. We do it as a long question. Right, so I'm going to need space for the next one. How it moves into the bloodstream. So what are we going to look at? Question number 2 is gaseous exchange. All right, so when we look at gaseous exchange, just asking us, let's go back quickly, right, about oxygen. It's not so much how it's going to ask about, all right, the carbon dioxide. So gaseous exchange, you're going to tell me, right, that air or oxygen moves into the alveoli. That's what we want. And there is a high concentration of oxygen in the alveoli. And there is a low concentration of oxygen in the blood. Oxygen moves, there we go, oxygen moves from a high concentration to a low concentration. So it moves from the alveoli into the bloodstream. And there we say how it moves in the blood. It's picked up by a red blood cell, and you can even say, tell me about oxyhemoglobin. And there it goes. It's on its way to the rest of the body. Right, so I'm not going to have time to be able to answer the last question, but the last question was about homeostasis. It is a question that they often do ask to explain how oxygen is controlled. You would then just in bullet form explain, all right, the whole process, the medulla oblongata, and how the heart and the lungs are going to come into working order. I'm afraid, guys, that is all we have time for today. Until next time, cherry bye.